My name's Ben Tarvey, author and bird photographer, and today I'm visiting a red kite feeding station near Aberystwyth, and whilst there I will share some of my own personal views about the red kite status in the UK. The birds have just been fed, and this happens on a daily basis. Seeing more kites here now than what was left in the entire UK in the 1970s. So, you know, it's been a huge reintroduction, translocation success with birds coming from Spain and Sweden. But what's my overall opinion? I often call the red kite the RSPB hidden agenda bird, because, you know, back in the 70s when kites were down to 40-50 pairs in Wales, the RSPB spoke about reintroducing red kites back to areas of Wales, and, you know, that would have been fine, and people had got behind it and thrown lots of money at it, but it's knowing when to stop. So then they introduced birds to Oxford and Leeds, up into Scotland, the Black Isles, and there's red kite feeding stations everywhere now in the UK, and they're probably numbering into like 4,000 pairs, maybe even more. And in many parts of the UK, especially Wales, red kites now outnumber buzzards, and they're still on the Schedule 1 list, which is fair enough, because if a gamekeeper persecuted a buzzard, which we know it has done in the past, and a gamekeeper got persecuted for killing 7 buzzards, all he got was a 70-day custodial sentence, which was suspended for 1 year. So as long as he was a good boy within that year, he basically got off scot-free. And that's what happened with red kites if they came off the Schedule 1 list. And people would risk killing them then. So obviously, you know, they need to stay on the Schedule 1 list. Once they started reintroducing kites to different areas, people at the RSPB must have known that these birds are going to start moving out and going on to keeper moorlands and reserves, and taking grouse poults and pheasant poults, and that will cause a problem. And then there'll be the odd keeper who doesn't want to abide by the laws and who will persecute and kill red kites. But then that gives the RSPB another purpose to bang the drums. We need more money off you because keepers are killing red kites. But in the grand scheme of things, who put the issue there in the first place? The RSPB did, and that's why I call it the RSPB hidden agenda bird. If truth be known, the UK has never been as populated with raptors since probably the Victorian times. We've got all these red kites, and, you know, people say, oh well, they used to be numerous in Victorian times. But in Victorian times, the landscape was different then. There was more waste products in the street. We didn't have the drainage and sewage systems what we've got today. And basically the red kite served as the bin man. They had a purpose then. But now they've got to be fed at feeding stations like this. And there's not enough food here to sustain all these kites. Once you start pairing up and breeding and going further afield, they won't keep returning to a feeding station every day for a meal. They'll go off and they'll be on grouse moors and they'll take birds. Now, it's very coincidental that since the release of all these birds in the 90s, red kite numbers in Wales have multiplied many times, and curlew numbers are down now to less than 400 pairs in Wales. Gamekeepers, they can manage moors, they can get rid of badgers, foxes, stoats, weasels, hedgehogs, anything that predates on eggs, ground nesting birds and the young, including hen harriers. You know, they'll even take hen harriers, foxes and badgers, they'll take hen harriers. So the gamekeepers do a great job to manage the moors. But then when you've got a Schedule 1 bird that's taking chicks from above, taking curlew chicks, taking grouse chicks from above, and you can't do anything about it, well, there's your problem. Keepers can manage what they can on the ground, but when you've got numerous kites like this coming in, and they're coming down and they're taking curlew chicks, grouse chicks. I mean, I've seen this at first hand. My friend's got a grouse moor up in Scotland, and when they introduced the kites to the Black Isle, 2 pairs of kites moved onto his land, and we actually watched them through binoculars, and they were going down and they were taking the grouse poults, and the curlews used to nest on there, which no longer nest on there. You know, so there's a lot to answer for when you're reintroducing these birds. I love seeing birds of prey, but I also see the bigger picture, and the RSPB have got a lot to answer for with the overkill translocation schemes, you know, and they're still doing it now with sea eagles, and, you know, and talking about putting golden eagles back into Wales. there's just no ending with them. I think they think, you know, all they seem to bother about is raptors, what people can see, you know, it brings the money in for them, you know, but they're not bothered about the stuff the normal folks can't see, you know, that they have to walk on some moorlands to see, such as curlews, golden plovers, things like that, you know, lapwings. A couple of years ago I came here, brought my young son, I think he was about 6 years of age at the time, and there was a kite that kept turning up, and it was leucistic, which was, it's not quite albino, it's not got the red eyes, but it's got a lot of white feathers and it looked more or less white. And we was here at this location on this spit watching the kites, and we was waiting for the leucistic red kite to turn up, and next minute we heard all this shouting and commotion, and some of the red kites, they'll drop food onto the water, but they swoop it up like a osprey would, pick it up off the water, and the wind must have got behind, and the kite went toppling over and ended up in the water. Everybody's shouting, oh, there's a red kite in the water. So RSPB that did run this reserve, I don't think they do now, they were running around like headless chickens. Oh, there's a kite, it was, there's a kite, it was. And nobody was doing anything about it. They were just all shouting about it and not doing anything about it. So I said to some lady who stood outside of me, excuse me, do you mind just minding my son and my camera equipment? She said, well, what are you doing? I said, well, these don't know what they're doing, so I'm going in there to save this kite. And I waded in up to just below my chest. I picked the kite up. I used to work at a falconry centre. I've got bird spray, so I know how to angle birds. And I brought it back. And the RSPB guy, who looks a bit like Harry Potter's dad, he was really made up the fact that he didn't have to go in wading up to his chest and getting wet and save this kite. You know, I think it could possibly be an hazard feeding kites near water, because if they went in the water and nobody's seen them, and you know, they probably can swim to the side, flap the wings and get to the side, just as a sea eagle does, but they haven't got the waterproofing what a sea eagle has. So once they get there, and said they went under a bush to dry out, and they could be there all night, and of course you could get a fox or a badger come along and take it. You know, so there's downfalls with everything.